Ah yes, Shovel Knight. A shining example of how the NES style of video games can still work great in the modern era, so long as you remove all that unnecessary artificial difficulty that plagues many of those older games. Anyway, on a completely unrelated note, here are the arbitrary restrictions of this video's challenge. Essentially, we're gonna follow the same rules as the Dirt Cheap achievement, meaning we're not allowed to collect anything that gives us gold. Except instead of one level, it's the entire game. Gems? No. Chests? Big no. Music sheets? I mean, they kinda indirectly give you money, so also no. And the money you drop after you die, don't even think about it. Hey, wait, hold on. If I'm not collecting gold, then how am I ever even gonna have money to drop? Well, that's where the rules get a little weird, for the game forces some money in your pocket whenever you beat a boss. Since this money is straight up unavoidable, I'm just gonna let it slide as our one exception. Who knows, maybe this tiny amount of money every level will end up being the primary force that makes this challenge extremely interesting or something, I don't know. So with my official code of honor established, it's time to answer the question. Is it possible to beat Shovel Knight without collecting gold? Oh, by the way, I know it might seem risky to subscribe right now since I'm kinda close to 100K, but remember that YouTube only sends a silver play button when you get to that point, which doesn't actually count as gold. So it's perfectly fine, it doesn't break the rules. I understand if you were hesitant at first and everything, but now you have no excuse. Whew. There it is, that familiar feeling of beginning a new challenge, full of both uncertainty and curiosity, wariness, but also optimism. This is a good time to just take a moment and really breathe it all in. Actually, you know what, let's take a few moments, why not? Or I guess as many moments as you freaking want, because this challenge so far is just a whole lot of waiting! Gold is everywhere in this game. It comes out of enemies, blocks, the dang ground. You'd be hard pressed to find something that doesn't make gems pop out. This means that a lot of this challenge's strategy consists of either not interacting with any of these things, or sitting around and waiting for the gems to despawn. The only thing that prevents this from working throughout the entire game is impatience and these guys, the floating gems. These gems never spawn from anything, and therefore they also never despawn. This means that we can't just wait until the coast is clear, we actually gotta pull out the schmoves in order to get around these guys. And I mean, come on, it's the first level, that's not gonna be a big problem. Oh, okay, cool, never mind, I guess it is gonna be a problem then. I can't make this jump without using the platform, and landing on this thing doesn't seem like a great plan. And since we have no access to items or anything yet, I really only had two other ideas to get past here. My first was to kill this skeleton guy and use his skull to bounce over to the ladder without having to use the platform. However, this just really didn't seem too feasible. No matter how many times I tried it, it just was too complex and a little too difficult for me. So I moved to my second idea instead, which was, you know, backtrack to the previous room, destroy this left block, damage this dragon enemy in order to move him to the left a bit, bounce off of his bubbles to land on the right block, wait for him to shoot some more bubbles, bounce off them as high as possible while moving into the screen transition to the left in order to cause a tear in dimensional space-time, and then pop out a little later in the level. Like, obviously. Don't worry, the rest of this level doesn't have anything nearly as complicated as that nonsense. After a tiny bit of platforming, a fight with Black Knight, and my first taste of cold hard cash, the first level was finally complete. So now, the challenge could truly begin. Although we do unlock a couple different areas, we really don't have a choice on where to go next. These two things aren't real, don't even think about them. The village is where you buy upgrades and items, but with a measly 1,000 gold, we're not able to buy anything here, not even the useless stuff. And as far as the two actual levels go, it's pretty clear to anyone who's played this game which of these goes first. It's time to do battle with the king. Now this level, although not technically difficult, in fact it's the easiest one by far, is certainly very annoying. There are way more random enemies, the hazards can be super dumb, and they don't want you to know this, but there's secretly gold hidden behind like all of these banner things, which is so mean. In addition, the fact that we actually have gold now means that we'll drop money bags when we die. Not only does this create a minefield wherever we died, but the fact that we're not allowed to recollect these things also means that that gold is permanently lost, as we can't just go back and beat the boss again for more money. So at this point, dying at all is essentially just an immediate level reset, unless I'm willing to lose out on gold that I may potentially need. Now I know that all sounds scary, but trust me, the level is still pretty easy, so we don't have to worry about it right now. Aside from avoiding death alongside a healthy amount of waiting, there wasn't much else this level had to offer, which meant that after I received my paycheck, it was time for the Lich Yard. So my intuition from like a minute ago was absolutely correct, cause this level is completely insane compared to what we've had so far. Not only is the base difficulty already a step up from the last 2 levels, but the mechanics here really do their best to work directly against us. In particular, dark rooms are terrible. Imagine one of those banners from last level just covering up the entire screen, and you can see why this might be a problem. Or should I say you can't see why it's a problem. Alright, I'm deleting the channel now. One of the spookier rooms was this one right here, primarily because of its ending and the room directly after it. The only way to bypass this area is to hug the right wall of the shaft as we fall down in order to sidestep these guys. A fairly simple solution, sure, but it shows that the game has the potential to screw us over if it really feels like it. And it didn't take long for this omen to come into fruition. Dang it. It may not look like it, but this block right here actually doesn't exist, meaning the only way to progress in this level is to fall down this shaft, which, unlike last time, is too thin to dodge the gems. This is a problem. I can't just wait these out because they're permanent, there's no way to sneak past them in any way, there aren't any space-time errors in the vicinity, and although there is a checkpoint here that could give access to the rest of the level, there's no way to activate it on this side of the wall in my current state. This seems pretty dang hopeless. However, unlike last time, we actually do have a few more options this go around. Namely, we actually have some money to our name. This means that we can return to the village and see what kinds of potentially useful items or upgrades that I can afford. Right off the bat, health and magic boosts won't do anything for me, and the effects that I can get from chalices range from pretty useless to completely detrimental. In addition, among the items that Chester here has for us, 2 of them are just projectiles, which have basically no uses outside of combat. This leaves us with only one other viable item at this point. One item commonly regarded as the most useless item in the entire game, the fishing rod. This thing's primary use is to access secrets throughout the levels. Secrets that usually just provide us with either music sheets or money, both of which are banned in this challenge. However, it also just so happens to have one other incredibly niche application. That's right, say hello to the only item in the entire game that can move permanent gems. I'm pretty sure the reason it can do this is so you can fish out money bags if you die in a pit, but the side effect of this is exactly what we need to continue to survive. For about 5 seconds. Even with that problem solved and this new tool in our belt, the final room of this level presents somehow an even bigger challenge. Of course, it's hard to even see, but if you look closely, you can see that there's another dang gem in my way, unbelievable! Although there might be a way to get over this gem by baiting one of these frogs over and pogoing off of them, the movement patterns of these guys are completely random, jumping at different heights, different distances, sometimes with electricity for some reason, and even in the case that I bounce off of them, these gems over here make the act of sticking the landing extremely difficult. And since the fishing rod can only move gems if they're below me, the only other option I had was to try to avoid the platform and make this massive jump. However, no matter how many times I tried, I just couldn't clear this gap. I needed just a tiny bit more to work with. But I mean, we've already exhausted all of our options, haven't we? Not only have we determined that all the other available items at this point just aren't going to be useful, but buying the fishing rod means we're too low on gold to buy anything even if that wasn't the case. It just didn't seem like we could buy our way out of this one. However, that wasn't quite true. Although there aren't any items left to buy in the village, there is still technically one other trinket that we have yet to consider. The Phase Locket, which isn't in the village, but is instead currently buyable in the actual Lich Yard. Not only is it available though, but it's also cheaper than it would be in the village if we can manage to reach it within the level. How much cheaper, you ask? Well, by doing some simple maneuvers to get to the chest, we'll get to see that discount ourselves. Aw yeah, and with only 250 gold left in our wallet, we can officially get our hands on the Phase Locket, and wait, how does this actually help us? I just bought it without actually thinking because it's the only thing I could even do. All this thing does is make us invincible for like a second. That doesn't help us solve our problem at all. Yeah, no, I'm totally lying to you. Not only does the Phase Locket make us invincible, but it also has the secondary effect of stalling us in the air. And although it may not seem immediately obvious, this actually means that we can use it in order to get more distance in our jumps. Let's talk about why. So most video games, platformers especially, have physics engines, meaning objects like Shovel Knight here have a position and a couple velocities and accelerations. For example, let's put him in the air. At this point, he's gonna start falling, and how fast he falls depends on gravity, velocity, a constant downward facing acceleration. Now obviously if I stall with the locket, it's gonna make him be in the air for longer. But if I pause the left jump to take the stalling animation into account, you can see that now both jumps land at the same time. Now at first this seems dumb. Obviously, if I artificially stall the left jump, then they're gonna be the exact same. That's not very groundbreaking. But that's actually not quite the case. Check out what happens when I use the locket as he's falling instead of at his peak. Same deal here. I pause the left jump at the same time to take the animation into account, but now there's a bit of a discrepancy all of a sudden. And this is because stalling doesn't just keep you in the air for a little bit, but it completely resets the falling speed to 0, meaning you have to start accelerating again. Whereas the left jump just picked right back up where it left off, at top speed. So that's fantastic. I can zero out my vertical momentum and stay in the air for a while and everything, but how does this get me more distance in my jumps? Well, let's now talk about horizontal acceleration. And here's the kicker, there is none, at least not in the air. This means that if you start holding a direction while airborne, you immediately start moving at top speed, no acceleration necessary. Put these two things together and what do you get? Well, just take a look for yourself. As you can hopefully tell, constantly zeroing out my falling speed without affecting my horizontal speed can actually make a pretty significant difference. In fact, if I edit out the locket animation entirely, it actually reveals the floating effect that we can achieve by doing this trick. I call this strat locket stalling. And here we'll finally get a chance to see the application of the culmination of all of this game knowledge and exploitation. Yeah, that's it. Whew, glad that's explained. And with that, the rest of the level is no problem. Honestly, even though locket stalling was what made this room possible, even just using the locket intentionally to bypass enemies without having to kill them is a great option to have in this challenge as well. So with the Spectre Knight finally defeated, we can officially move on with just a couple more tricks up my sleeve. Wait, no, we also gotta do the dream sequence, shoot. Luckily, even though all of these enemies drop an absurd amount of money when killed, we don't actually get punished if we die here, meaning we can just stand completely still and there's no problem. In addition, we also get a free meal ticket here, which is our only way to gain health without having to spend our precious gold, so that's pretty nice. With the first few levels completed, we unlock a whole new area, which means that we got some deciding to do. We have access to 3 new levels here, which also means we potentially have access to 3 new items. However, although we will start getting a little bit more gold from defeating bosses, the items themselves will also start to get much more expensive, even if we can manage to buy them at a discount. Since I'm currently too poor to buy anything, it would make the most sense to first complete a level with an item that I don't think I'll want, get paid, and then play the next level with the intent of buying something. With this in mind, let's look at our options. If you're familiar with this game, the Dust Knuckles definitely seem to be the standout, as they actually allow you to cover much larger distances while midair so long as you have stuff to punch. However, my eyes are actually more set on the Alchemy Coin. For although it just seems like a normal projectile, one that generates gems no less, it's actually an object that you can hit and bounce off of, which can get you some extra height in certain circumstances. Since we already have locket stalling to potentially gain more distance in my jumps, a method to gain height is just a little bit more attractive to me right now. However, at the bottom of this barrel, we have the Anchor, which is just another useless projectile, much like the ones we've already seen. So it's pretty dang clear which of these levels we gotta do first. Never mind, we're going to the Lost City. This level is dumb, but since we have our extremely useful items from the Lich Yard, it actually isn't too bad difficulty-wise. The Phase Locket in particular was an absolutely insane pickup for us. Not only did it help with this beetle auto-scroller, as it allowed me to locket stall over some treacherous bits, but it also showed its versatility in this room, which introduces this bouncy slime. Going over these gems is impossible, making going under our only option. Luckily, locket stalling allows us to just barely sneak right past unscathed and continue the level. This part was also pretty frightening at first, as bouncing on this slime down here obviously didn't seem like a very good option for us. However, although these slime balls are meant to just turn lava into slime to bounce off of, they can also be bounced off of themselves. I can use this fact here to just leap over the entire screen and avoid having to do this section altogether. Also check this out. Yeah, you could say I game from time to time. Apart from those few areas though, the rest of this level was pretty self-explanatory given the strategies we've already used previously in the challenge. Meaning that after a quick bout with the Mole Knight, we get our quick cash and we're able to move on. Now, before we head straight into the Explodatorium and get our sought-after coin, there are a couple things that I need to clear up first. 1, this village is useless, just got a bunch of garbage that's way too expensive to even think about. And 2, mini bosses. These guys are actually kind of interesting, since beating them up actually nets you a decent amount of gold without having to pick anything up. So, since this is pretty much the same as the gold that I get from the main bosses, could this be another way to get gold in this challenge? What? No! It's called collecting gold, you doofus. Since these guys, unlike actual bosses, are not required to complete the game, collecting gold from beating them up is banned. However, this also has the fun side effect of occasionally blocking my path on the map screen, for if I ever interact with them, I'm forced to either defeat them and fail the challenge, or die and take a permanent hit to my savings. So lucky me, I get to do some more waiting. But with the Lost City completed, the bag secured, and the wandering challengers ignored, it was time to enter the Explodatorium and grab that coin. This was a mistake. Now, I'm not sure if you picked up on this yet, but everything here explodes. Enemies are flying everywhere, gems are flying everywhere, I'm flying everywhere. This is not an easy place to move around in, let alone while also dodging the cursed crystals. Despite this, there's still no shortage of problematic areas amidst the already existent uptick in general difficulty. Take this place for example. Yeah, I get it, this is the room where the money-based item is stored, but that shouldn't give this game an excuse for nonsense. Oh hey wait, speaking of, we finally got the coin, let's go. That being said though, I really don't want to use it yet. I don't need it for its height capabilities yet, it drops money all over the place when I use it, and it just sucks up my magic supply, which is pretty sparse on account of the fact that I am constantly and consistently broke. Trust me, I'll definitely need it eventually, but for now, we're gonna have to tackle the rest of the level on our own. And by God, after the midway boss, this thing really decides to pump up the jam. This area required some good old-fashioned locket stalling to get both distance to make it over these bad boys and invincibility to avoid having to think about the flames. Then, after a legendary duel with this knight that devolved into camping him out with the ladder, we got to this room, which is not a pretty sight. You can't jump off of ladders, which means we're gonna have to find a way to avoid falling right into this thing's trap. Locket stalling is usually great, but it's just not enough to get over this guy. So instead, I drop off the ladder, turn around, do a shovel attack, and then start holding left as I get hit by this flame. The attack allows me to continue facing right even though I'm moving left. And since taking damage sends you in the opposite direction you're facing, this boost gives just enough height and distance to avoid collecting this problem gem, allowing us to move right along. However, the final stretch of this level was no joke either, with way too many things going on at once. The worst part was this section here. I had to be careful not to accidentally destroy these blocks as I needed to use them as platforms. Additionally, I used a locket stall here to ensure that I didn't accidentally jump too high here and collect this gem, which was incredibly stressful, especially given that this was basically the last thing you have to do. But with all that, alongside a slick kill on the Plague Knight, the Explodatorium was officially complete, with only one level left in this area. Of course, although you guys haven't quite seen it yet, I, at this point in the challenge, have. And let me be the first to tell you that this is where things start to get real. Welcome to the Iron Whale, home of the Treasure Knight. And although that name might not mean anything to the average player, we will soon be able to see the true meaning of this knight's title. It's just cause there's gems everywhere, that's it. Before even starting this nonsense, I went ahead and quickly replayed the entirety of the Lost City. You know, just for fun. Nah, it's actually cause I wanted the dust knuckles. Since we're trying to be frugal here, it's much more beneficial to go back into this level now that we have money to buy the discounted version rather than wasting 500 gold on the easy way out in the village. Of course, nothing else was really different on my second run through. Now we're back to being broke, but we're also as powerful as we've ever been. With a multitude of new tools at our disposal, it's time to get digging. Much like every level at this point, this place pretty much never backs down in terms of overall difficulty. But as far as truly abhorrent rooms go, we're looking at about 3 throughout the entire level. 3 nightmare rooms that only get harder as the level goes on. So let's go ahead and walk through these rooms, case by case. Case 1 is a puzzling one. Close quarters with enemies that can't be killed and gems that can't be jumped over. Clearly, our only promising option here is the fishing rod, as it's the only thing that's able to move these guys out of our way. The only issue with that is our magic, as we can only use the rod a maximum of 5 times at once before we completely run out. So this room is less of a test of skill and more of a puzzle. Here was my solution. First, I cast a line here to drag this gem out from under this platform. Then, after a damage boost and a magic refill, I jump up here and use 3 rods to slowly move this gem completely out of the way. From there, I make my way down and quickly line up Shovel Knight in this precise spot before this enemy comes back for revenge, which gives the perfect spacing to wrangle this gem straight into this tiny hole, getting it out of our way and scoring a couple points for our team in the process. From there, a few simple jumps get us out of there easy peasy. Of course, this sentiment couldn't last forever, as the second case provides a much bigger challenge. These gems are essentially irrelevant, but these guys really put up a fight. We can't thread the needle through here or anything, which means we're gonna have to find some way to get some extra height and jump clear over them. And you know what that means? It's finally time to bust out the coin. Here's the deal. We can flip the coin and bounce off of it for height, but the only issue with that is the fact that the coin spawns in front of you when you use it and travels at the same speed as Shovel Knight, meaning we're gonna have to find some way to catch up with the coin in order to bounce off of it. In this case, we luckily have access to this moving platform, which moves us very quickly so long as we're standing on it. This means that we can line ourselves up and, with precise timing, fall towards the platform, use the coin in the air in order to keep moving forward, walk at super speed for a short bit, then flip the coin and pogo off of it. At this point I can pause, switch to the phase locket, and then use my remaining magic to lock it stall over and just barely make it. This was not only a pain to figure out, but actually doing it is extremely difficult, as very few things can go wrong here in order for it to work. However, despite this, I eventually got pretty used to doing this trick, over and over and over and over again, because it truly dwarfs in comparison to Case 3, the final room of the hardest level in this already insane challenge. A very easy and actually quite satisfying room when played casually, but a true terror for a man who just wants to avoid picking up gems. Let's take a look at the structure of this room. We're intended to use this rocket platform to take us through the entire thing, blasting away walls in our way and jumping off right at the end. Of course, the gem placements, outlining the entirety of the intended path, means that we're gonna have to stray away from this strategy just a little bit. This room really pushed my ability to not only problem solve, but also execute difficult maneuvers in this challenge. It didn't seem possible at first, but here was my process. I couldn't use this platform for longer than a second before inadvertently collecting some gold, but I still needed to use it to cross this initial massive gap. So to do so, I tossed out a coin from over here to hit the lever and activate it for me. From there, I could intersect with it in the middle of this gap, right in between these 2 gems to make it to this first wall. Now here I could destroy this wall and then use the phase locket in order to stand and jump off these spikes, but I'm too short on magic to be able to afford doing that. So instead, I attack to start destroying the wall, jump off the bottom of the wall as it's exploding, and at the peak of my jump, use the dust knuckles to punch through the top of the wall as it's exploding. This gets the necessary distance to make it to the next wall. Of course, I have to do the same technique for this one before getting here, where I do a slight variation of the same trick that doesn't involve using the dust knuckles in order to preserve the last bit of magic I need. Now here I have nowhere near the resources I need to get all the way over these 2 guys, and threading the needle between these 2 gems seems impossible, which leaves us with only one other avenue, going under. The issue? Well, I only have enough magic for exactly 3 more item uses. I use the phase locket, a utility-based item that stalls me in the air, granting some additional distance in my jump and providing some invincibility for these spikes. I use the alchemy coin, a projectile that shoots out in front of me, acting as an object that I can interact with. I use the dust knuckles, a melee attack that punches through a variety of objects to push Shovel Knight forward. All 3 of these items give me just enough horizontal distance to slide right under the gem and onto the final spikes of the room. And with one final stretch as my invincibility runs out, this room, and consequentially this level, through the use of all of my magic in every one of my items, has been officially conquered. I mean, yeah, I can't die in the boss either, or else I lose all my money or whatever, but that's beside the point. Treasure Knight also has a really cool move that can steal a ton of your gold, so that's a fun one to avoid as well. But with that, alongside yet another exciting dream sequence, the second area has finally been completed, with no gold to our name. Except that, I guess, but ignore that. Area 3 has finally been unearthed, meaning we again have an important decision to make. where are we dropping? Of course, inflation is constantly on the rise, making everything real dang expensive. Well, almost everything. For some reason, although the war horn and the propeller dagger are both a staggering 4,000 gold, the mobile gear keeps its relatively low price of 3,000 gold. This means that we could actually afford it with our current funds if we can manage it. Of course, this leaves us with the question, do we actually want it? Yes, we absolutely do. And honestly, it wasn't even that hard to get. The entire level up to that point is pretty barren as far as gems go. That is until the actual room with the gear itself. What in the heck is going on here? Luckily, with a little bit of finesse, it isn't too bad to maneuver around these things with our now deep pockets. It wasn't long until we got our hands on a new toy, at the expense of being completely bankrupt as usual. Now the way back through this room was actually more troubling than the initial path through, specifically because of this jump here, but luckily I can showcase the power of my newfound gear to get out of here. As you can see, this thing essentially acts as my own little moving platform that can ride on spikes and hop off the edge of platforms. I combine this with the fact that you can't pick up gems while you're in the phase lock animation to go right through these guys. This usually is impossible since you can't move during this animation on your own, but the gear has the power to provide that mobility for me. As you can see, this thing is incredibly versatile, which is exactly the reason I wanted it. It simplifies so many of these sections, has so many uses. Why is it less expensive than the dang war horn? Anyway, the rest of this level really wasn't too much of a challenge, especially with the gear at our disposal. That was, of course, until the final auto-scroller room, which was, in fact, too much of a challenge. These first two veins of gems weren't the worst things in the world, but this line right here was really annoying. I'm sure there are probably a couple different things I could have done here, especially with the gear or maybe even the coin, but I ended up eventually figuring out that you can just barely sidestep this gem with really precise timing, which I obviously preferred just a little bit more. So with the Clockwork Tower scaled and the Tinker Knight embarrassed twice, it was time to make some moves. Now that we got the gear out of the way, our next decision regards the remaining two items in the next couple levels. And yeah, the propeller dagger wins and it's absolutely no contest. So since we didn't get quite enough gold to be able to afford it at this exact moment, we're gonna have to plunder the stranded ship for some more expendable funds. It's a dang miracle that the gear happened to be a little cheaper for no good reason, because man oh man would this level suck without it. Not only can the gear allow us to glide over these gems that are lying on the ground, but the extra height that we get from jumping off of it is enough to completely skip having to do this nightmare room. All was going pretty dang smoothly up until the moving rainbow statue thing section. Here, we gotta smack this thing in order to move it around and fly over some of these bottomless pits. The issue here arises pretty quick, however, in the form of this room. We need to go up here, but this way is blocked by gems, this shaft is too narrow to fit in, and there's no way that I know of to destroy blocks above you in this game, even if I had access to every item. I mean, I guess you could buy an amiibo and get a bunch of extra items that aren't usually available, but this is a no money challenge, so that's also off the table. It really seemed like, yet again, we were completely out of option. Oh, wait, never mind. Apparently you can actually fit in this tiny gap, it's just literally sub-pixel perfect. Works for me, I guess. The rest of this level was tough, sure, but nothing that couldn't be puzzled out. This area looked really bad until I realized that trying to go under these gems was one of the dumbest decisions in my life. This room looked rough until the gear saved my life once again, and this area right here wasn't the prettiest, for there's not really much to work with on account of the fact that there is no floor. However, with a locket stall and a bit of waiting until you're pretty much inside this enemy's hitbox, it's possible to bounce far enough to the left in order to sidestep this guy while still getting enough height to grab onto the ladder. From there, all it took was one last section of damage boosting to victory until I got the chance to smack up the Polar Knight and tackle the last of this third area. Finally, we've reached the flying machine, home of the fabled propeller dagger, aka the best item in the entire game. An item that on its own would have been able to solve many of this challenge's hardships if we were given access to it sooner. So here we finally are, in the last of the normal levels, with enough money saved up to buy it if we are given the chance. The only thing we gotta do now is get there. Dang it. This is terrible. Much like the second level in this challenge, this place is covered in banners that block off visibility in certain areas. And it just so happens that in this case, there's a gem hiding right behind here. A gem whose position I still don't really know for sure. You can't jump to the left of it, it seems too high to jump over, and no matter what I tried here, I just couldn't lock down where this thing actually was. This is a massive issue, as my first step to solving any problem is defining the problem. But if I can't see where this thing is, coming up with the strategy to get around it was a whole new challenge entirely. So I decided to take matters into my own hands. On a completely separate save file that has access to every item in the game, including the propeller dagger, I trekked forth into the level with the intent of testing. My first hypothesis, going over the gem, seemed to initially be a bust, as I couldn't even get over it with the propeller dagger. However, upon first jumping off of a gear, I actually could make it over with a propeller dagger. This implied that wherever it was, the gem had at least enough space above it for me to slide right past. However, finding a way over this thing without the propeller dagger was gonna take some work. My first idea was to jump off a gear, use a coin at the peak of my jump, and then punch through it with the dust knuckles, much like the trick I used in the Iron Whale. But the coin actually has a bit of a startup period, meaning I can't punch through it immediately without falling a bit first. This meant that using a coin here just seemed unviable, as I would always dip too far down and accidentally collect the gem. This meant that the dust knuckles were probably also out of the running, as the only other thing in this room to punch were these propeller rats, who not only move semi-randomly, making their position hard to determine, but they also drop gold when they die, making it pretty risky to charge right through them. So this leaves us with only one other option for getting this extra bit of distance: good old-fashioned locket stalling. The only issue with this route is that, once again, my magic supply is the limiting factor. Since I have to spend 6 magic on the initial gear, we're left with just enough juice to use exactly 3 locket stalls. The only question now was, is it enough? Oh yeah, you bet it is. Now I just gotta do it on my actual file, alongside the rest of the level. Probably multiple times. Woo! On the bright side, however, now that we've gotten past that point, we pretty much have a straight shot to the propeller dagger section, and with a bit of extra maneuverability, we can finally grab the best item in the game. This thing basically just lets us fly. Although it technically does nothing for upwards movement, it's everything we'd ever want and more as far as horizontal movement goes. And I start using it to my advantage immediately. Now, although I'd love to say that the rest of the level was easy after getting this thing, that unfortunately wasn't quite the case, as there were still many areas that weren't too pretty even with our newfound propeller dagger. Take this zone for example. Because of the fan, I'm pretty sure there's no way to go under these gems, so I instead had to very carefully sidestep this guy to the left before being able to fly right over. These wind rooms were also a little bit stressful, although they were nothing that a little bit of schmovement couldn't take care of. So with a little bit more flying and a little bit more smacking, we could finish off the flying machine, grab our allowance, and continue on to the final levels in the game, with a nearly full kit of tools and strategies at our disposal. At this point, we only have 2 more final levels alongside the final boss, the Enchantress. Neither of these levels introduce any new items, meaning all of our excess money here could be spent on other things if we really want to. But what kind of challenge would this be if I bought things not out of necessity, but for what, convenience? Absolutely not, we're doing the tower. The first of these final levels started off pretty tame. I guess it makes sense to not have too much money floating around at the end of the game. The only potentially scary part here was this dark section, specifically this area right here, with this gem blocking my way down this narrow path. However, although you can't really see it, this bottom area is also a viable option, allowing us to slide right by without any worries. And with another kill on the Black Knight, the first of the tower levels was already complete. With a little bit of extra money in my pocket, I continued to hoard before moving on to our penultimate level. After a bunch of swimming, jumping, bouncing, smacking, dancing, evading, and just straight vibing, we were able to make it all the way to the final boss rush without too much issue. And as always, death is the only thing we have to avoid here. But with our complete item tool set alongside the immense amount of practice this challenge has given me, we were able to make it. And with one final gemless bout with the Enchantress, we were staring at a clear path to the end of this challenge. It seemed pretty dang smooth. In all honesty, the last couple levels here were actually pretty easy. However, despite this, we can't forget the many hardships that we had to overcome on our way here. The work we had to put in to build ourselves up to prepare for this very moment. To collect all of our items, to assemble our upgrades, to learn our tricks and strategies. Although the ending was fairly easy, every step of the way was earned. So, is it possible to beat Shovel Knight without ever collecting gold? Yeah, sure, now we know it is. But more importantly, now we know exactly what it took to make that a reality. Hey, welcome to the end of the video. If you made it here, let me know by doing all the YouTube things like subscribing or, whatever they are. If you like these sorts of videos, then you're in luck, because I've made a bunch of these challenge videos already, and I've got a bunch more coming in the future. Who knows, maybe I'll tackle this same challenge with the other Shovel Knight campaigns in the future. It could happen. Like I said, I got a bunch of stuff planned, so stay tuned for some more gaming content in the future, as usual. For now though, I'm a dip. Oh yeah, also, did you really think that I actually beat the Iron Whale? Are you some kinda idiot? I tested that frame 1 and deceived you with movie magic. Who do you think I am?